We come to you this Black History Month, bringing together 6 of our esteemed financial advisors to showcase their perspectives on being a financial advisor, being independent, being a business owner, and being a part of the Black community in this industry. We'll share stories, experiences, insights, and go around the table to highlight this community of advisors. Our advisors come from all walks of life, different career journeys, and they are all building their businesses in different ways. We'll cover how they came to be financial advisors, what unique challenges they face as Black advisors, why they chose the independent advisor path, and how we as an industry can better support the Black community. You all decided to become financial advisors for numerous reasons, obviously, but as we all know, Black advisors are still well into the minority in this profession. According to the 2020 CFP Board white paper, there's still only 3,259 Black and Latinx CFP professionals in total, less than 4% of CFP professionals overall, while these demographics represent nearly 30% of the country's population. So given those staggering statistics, let's dig into why that might be the case. What barriers did you face as a financial advisor when you were entering the industry and building your business?
Some of the main problems was trying to find a program that you could actually get into. So I remember the first half of my career, I was in bank management. So I was a branch manager when I was 22 or 23 years old. And only reason I did that was to get my foot in the door in finance so I could find a program that I could get into that would get me licensed and get me trained. And it took 10 years for me to get a program to get licensed and get trained, because I remember I would interview and then magically 3 or 4 other people would get the job. And then I would interview again, and it just kept happening over and over. I think some of the problems are because there's nobody that looks like you in the hiring position. It makes it that more difficult to compete. So a lot of times you're dealing with family, friends, and friends of friends that get their children into these programs, and that's who you're competing with when you don't have a connection in that department. It's a hard mountain to climb, and the business is hard enough anyway. Um, so you add that on top of it, it's a lot to overcome.
We come into this industry and sometimes I'm not sure if it's like, hey, we have a person here, but once we get there, what happens from there? How are we being supported? And for me, I just didn't necessarily feel that I was supported. And there were those groups or those teams and things that were happening at a lot of these farms and these conversations that I just was never a part of. And it was myself and it was another older gentleman who had been there, very successful, but I literally never really saw him. He would come out every now and then, but between myself and him on the floor, there was no one else there to really look to help guide me or really just kind of teach me, how to not only just be successful in this environment, but also to really build a successful practice. But it was hard to just kind of maneuver when you're not really being seen. I think a part of it is just no one's really sees you when you're there.
I can also echo the sentiment because coincidentally, I was at the same firm.
No shade.
I think one of the biggest challenges that us as Blacks face in this industry is, number one, when we come into the industry, for the most part, we probably go to the wirehouses. So we're going to the investment companies, right? And the structure is very, very different from the independent world. You go into those wirehouses, you get started, they're paying you a meager salary, but then you have all these production hurdles, right? Which the industry itself is very stressful. But then to know that every day when you walk in the door, there is a goal that you have to meet. So when you have that aspect of stress, and in addition to that, it's combined with not having support. So for the most part, as Brian mentioned, the person who's hiring you probably does not look like you. And, when you go to those larger firms, they're probably speculating that you're not going to make it and you're not going to be there long, right? So you don't get the support. And then also too, you're walking around and you're watching your peers be supported, your peers who don't look like you getting support, and they're having more senior advisors pull them up and give them accounts to work and, just helping them establish themselves and get their feet firmly planted. in the industry. And that's not there. That's not there for us because as we all have mentioned and agree that there are very few of us in the industry. And particularly when you go to large firms like that, as Brian mentioned, I remember being one of 3 Black advisors in an office of about 120. And, you know, I mean, you notice it. It's hard not to notice. It is very hard not to notice. And thirdly, to survive at organizations like that, you need to be bringing in clients that are high net worth clients and that have a very high amount of investable assets, right? So that means that you're probably not going to be able to look to your community or people who look like you. So you got to step outside your community. And when you think about doing that, let's look at it from the client's perspective. For the most part, people generally do business with people who look like them. I think that is going to be their default. So when we're going to clients who don't look like us, right? They probably have 5 or 7 other advisors who are in their community who look like them, who want to do business with them. So, you know, there's a combination of factors that work against you when you come in the industry and you're not coming in under your mother, your father, your neighbor. You don't have anybody bringing you in to help you get established, to even teach you the industry, because it is not the most intuitive industry to understand. We offer a lot of different services, a lot of different products. There's a lot of regulation, right? So you literally have to take time, probably like your first year or 2 years, just understanding the industry and the regulation and how to do business, the different products, the different platforms. There is a very steep learning curve. And without having the support and someone to help you understand what this is, how it works, how to make it work for clients, and how to make it for yourself as the advisor and as a business owner, it can be very difficult. It can almost be impossible.
To add on to just the client aspect of it, because I think that's our biggest headwind in this industry, is, you know, the wealth being concentrated at the top. If you come into this industry and your clients are, you know, Black and they look like you, chances are they may not have the same wealth paradigm that the other race has. And so that's a grind, and trying to find enough to meet, you know, these hurdles, or if you start out in the, you know, hybrid independent space, enough to make a living, you have that as a challenge. And on the flip side, if you're, you know, going outside your box and outside your comfort zone and going where the wealth is, there's all this preconceived notions and systemic, you know, biases against who should you take your advice from, and that, you know, they're not people that look like us. And so you can't work with your own people. You can't work with those people. You're not getting support. I think it's just a multitude of factors leading to the 1% retention rate.
Absolutely. Echoing all of that, I think for me, being able to actually live among all groups of individuals, you know, I go see my poor cousins one day and next thing I'm at a house with a pool and a tennis court. What I learned was this: when I first got hired, you know, luckily I had a guy was a manager, South Regional Manager, a guy named Marcellus Reed. He was a top producer back in the 70s and 80s. He hired me, he goes, go ahead and sell. Well, here's the first part. I made no money. I literally was living at home, going out, getting in a suit, and, you know, trying to get my car to go to people that had money and parking a block or 2 away to go walk up to their door and convince them to put money in a retirement product. And, you know, and the issue is I found out that what I had to do was to have a lot of third-party information. In other words, I would go out with Money Magazine and Consumer Reports when I was talking about annuities. And even though I knew the answer, I had to carry this binder of third-party information to build credibility with those that didn't look like me. All right. And so whereas my counterparts who I would go on a joint call with would say, well, this is what things are, here's how they work, and they were readily believed. Whereas for me, the people that didn't look like me assumed that they already knew more than I did. And then the fact that I'm probably driving a car doesn't look all that great, and you're trying to get that. So the first thing I learned was, how do I build credibility so that it's not just me, Terry Colon, the Black guy, saying it to you? For the younger folks in this industry, it's clearly credentials. If I were going back 31 years, I would have every credential I could, because then that person sitting across from me, I can out credential them. But in my industry, where I'm at now in 31 years, everybody that I work with knows who I am. I don't need the credentials, they're irrelevant. It's the knowledge base. They know when they ask me a question, I don't have to go to a manual. But the second hurdle is this: you're torn between wanting to help everybody and trying to survive, right? And I watched, when I first started working for Valak, somebody that didn't look like me become the top producer, and he was literally given a hospital. He just had to go there in the morning and do open enrollment. And all of a sudden he's producing money. They said, well, Terry, you can go anywhere, but your territory is South Central LA, your territory is LA Unified. So finally they loosened it. And I realized really quickly, I'm going to follow the rules until they don't make sense. If I would have did what they told you, which is what most of us do, you go sit here, let us give you business, you will starve out of the industry. You will not make it. You have to really have a support system in your first 5 years. I would make 50,000 one year and make 15,000 the next, and it would fluctuate monthly. And my mom even told me, you know what? Why don't you get a job at the post office or something? Be a school teacher. You always have my house digging through my refrigerator and freezer trying to get some food. You ain't gonna make no money at this. But I had to still believe in myself. It took me 5 years to figure out how to make money, but it also taught me where my niche was, where my personality was. But I also was, in those early years, told to conform. That's another issue. I look at Russ over here. I look at Danica. I know all of us, Brian, have our own personalities. But when you come into that corporate structure where people don't look like you, you have somebody telling you, here, follow the script. This is the PowerPoint presentation. Do not deviate from that. At the end of the day, our industry is not designed to give us the income in the early years and the training that we need to survive. And then it tries to take away our uniqueness and try to force us into a mold that's not us. And then when we don't make it doing that, then they quickly say, well, you didn't meet your production goal. Right. Well, you didn't give me any, there was no way I was set up to fail. And it takes a long amount of hard-headedness and preservation to know that and still keep going, because I always felt that one day I'm going to break through this. And it literally took 10 years when it should have took 3.
My journey was probably different. I tried to do things the most difficult way possible, in that I decided to hang out my shingle without ever working for another firm, without having any experience at all, just saying, well, I'm a financial advisor. Now, of course, I was, again, this was my second career. I was probably overly confident. I had an MBA in finance and an undergraduate in accounting. And my view was, well, I should be able to figure this out. I shouldn't need to do anything. Now, one of the things that was very helpful for me is as a CPA, you could challenge and take the CFP without going through all the other requirements. And so I knew I needed to learn the industry. And so I just started immediately studying for the CFP. 6 months later, took the exam and passed it. But the only thing that kept me going, because I didn't have really a base, is that I used to teach financial classes for my church. We had a financial services ministry, and we just taught people how to get out of debt. We taught them financial concepts. And really, some of my very first clients were people that came out of the church, came out of my congregation, came out of those classes, and just said, hey, can you work with me outside of the church? I'll pay you. And so all I had to do was figure out, well, okay, how can you pay me? Do you have any assets? Because that was the only way I could get paid at that time, is they had to have some assets. And several of them were retiring and said, yeah, I have some assets, we can roll it over. And that's how I got started. So I didn't feel the pressure that some of the others felt of working in those institutions. My pressure was probably more self-imposed, in that you know, I knew I had to try and build this business on my own. But I do understand the barriers. I do, based on what everyone has said. I understand. I think the biggest barriers for African Americans is the compensation issues, the training issues, and the mentoring issues. And I think all of those are challenges that do serve as barriers to entry into the profession.